Impeach President Donald Trump, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will finally send the impeachment articles to the Senate next week to kick off the trial over there in the Senate. Republican sources involved in the planning tell CNN that with this development, they think Trump could be acquitted by his February 4th State of the Union address, something Pelosi, according to sources, was hoping to avoid so as to hang a cloud over his televised speech. Don't let anyone tell you
something is happening inside the walls of this government that nobody in the mainstream media is talking about loudly enough, and it is not just coming from the outside anymore. It is not just judges issuing rulings or prosecutors building cases or the opposition party filing motions and delivering fiery speeches on the floor. No, this pressure is coming from inside, from the very people Donald Trump himself handpicked and placed in positions of immense power. These are the cabinet members who sat through those tense Oval Office meetings, who signed off on controversial decisions, who stood before cameras and defended the administration with ironclad loyalty while privately wrestling with doubts that gnawed at their consciences. And now those private conversations, those whispered admissions of alarm, are starting to surface in ways that cannot be ignored or spun away. Congress is moving too, and not with the usual slow, cautious, hedge every bet approach that has defined so many previous attempts to hold power accountable. This time the urgency is palpable, the kind of frantic energy that tells you the people inside the buildings, the ones with access to the raw intelligence and the closed-door briefings, understand something the public outside is only beginning to sense in their bones. The impeachment storm is real. The cabinet pressure is real. The conversations about invoking the 25th Amendment that once stayed locked behind heavy White House doors are now spilling into the light of day. And when you combine a Congress sharpening its constitutional knives with Trump's own inner circle starting to put distance between themselves and the presidency, you have the most dangerous political situation any sitting president has faced since the final desperate days of Watergate. Picture it. The walls are not just closing in from protesters outside or critics in the media. They are closing in from every direction at once. Congress, the courts, the financial system, and now, most devastatingly, from within the very administration Trump built. Outside the Capitol, the scene unfolds with a strange, almost surreal tension. Reporters swarm the area in greater numbers than anyone expected, their cameras and microphones creating a thick forest of steel and lenses. At first it looks like the media might outnumber everyone else, but as the morning wears on, the crowd begins to shift and grow. Protesters start arriving in waves around 9 in the morning, their signs bobbing under the winter sun, voices rising in chants that echo off the marble steps. By 10:30 the energy peaks as a rally forms, and Marjorie Taylor Greene steps into the fray, her presence igniting fresh roars from supporters. The ratio is fluid, shifting hour by hour, pro-Trump voices clashing with counter-protesters, media crews weaving between them like referees in a match that could turn chaotic at any second. But this external noise, as loud and visible as it is, pales compared to the quiet earthquake rumbling through the corridors of power inside. Here is what makes this impeachment storm hit with such raw, unprecedented force, why it feels different from anything that has come before. We have been here with Trump and impeachment twice already, and both times the story followed a painfully familiar arc. Democrats draft articles, Republicans lock arms in defense, the Senate acquits along party lines, and the nation moves on to the next crisis. But this time the mechanics have shifted dramatically. The pressure is not coming from one side only. It is multidimensional, relentless. You have Congress actively advancing impeachment articles while, at the same moment, a documented history of cabinet officials quietly discussing the 25th Amendment, high-profile resignations in protest, and insiders privately signaling they would not defend Trump if the crisis deepened. All of it forms a backdrop that changes everything. The 25th Amendment is the linchpin that makes this story constitutionally explosive, utterly unlike any previous impeachment fight. Impeachment requires Congress to act alone, turning the narrative into a partisan showdown that Trump's team has mastered defending. But the 25th Amendment demands the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare in writing that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. When that declaration reaches the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate, the vice president immediately steps into the role of acting president. The president can contest it, of course, sending his own declaration that no inability exists. Then Congress has 21 days to vote on whether to sustain the cabinet's determination, needing a 2/3 majority in both chambers to keep the president sidelined. If they fail to reach that threshold, he resumes power. Think about how lethal that mechanism becomes if the cabinet actually moves. Under impeachment, it is always possible to paint the effort as a partisan witch hunt. Democrats versus Republicans, deep state versus the people's choice. Trump and his allies can rally the base with the familiar script and hold enough Senate votes to block conviction. But when the president's own cabinet, his hand-picked loyalists, the men and women he trusted with the nation's most sensitive secrets, initiates removal, the entire political calculus collapses. You cannot scream partisan attack when the people pulling the constitutional lever are your own Secretary of State, your own Secretary of Defense, your own Attorney General. These are not faceless bureaucrats. They are the inner circle Trump personally selected, confirmed, and defended. An inside job like that is impossible to spin. It shatters the partisan framing and forces everyone, supporters, skeptics, the public, to confront the possibility that the concerns are not invented but rooted in what those closest to power have witnessed firsthand. The documented history of Trump officials discussing the 25th Amendment is not some fevered speculation or anonymous leak designed to sell headlines. It is reported fact, drawn from books written by former officials who were in the rooms, from sworn testimony in congressional proceedings, from journalism backed by sources with direct access inside the administration. Senior figures sat in those secure conference rooms and seriously weighed whether the constitutional mechanism for removing a president might be necessary. They did not pull the trigger then, but the mere fact that the conversation happened at the highest levels reveals how this administration has been viewed from within. That history becomes the backbone of the current cabinet flip narrative because it proves the idea is not fantasy, it has precedent. It has been seriously considered before, and now, with fresh pressures mounting, the door that was never fully closed could swing wide open again. High-profile resignations add another devastating layer to this story. When senior officials walk out publicly citing an inability to serve in good conscience, they do far more than leave a job. They etch their objections into the permanent public record. They declare, from the perspective of someone who had full access to the decision-making process, that the conduct inside was serious enough to demand a moral break. Each resignation becomes a documented statement that the alarm is not purely external or political, it is internal and substantive. These are people who saw the full picture, the late-night calls, the impulsive directives, the moments when judgment seemed clouded, and decided staying would make them complicit in something they could no longer defend. The accumulation of those departures builds a body of evidence that resonates deeply because it comes from insiders, not outsiders. It lends credibility and emotional weight to every claim that the presidency is veering into dangerous territory, and none of this is happening in isolation. The impeachment momentum and the potential cabinet pressure are converging alongside other institutional forces that have been building for months. Fraud findings from court proceedings, contempt rulings that have eroded credibility, threats of asset seizures from state attorneys general, ongoing bank record investigations, all of it is landing simultaneously on the same administration. Courts, Congress, the financial system, and now potentially the cabinet itself are applying pressure from every angle. When so many independent institutions act at once, the political physics change. Each ruling gives the others more cover. Every congressional vote makes it harder to dismiss legal proceedings as pure partisanship. Every resignation adds to the public record and makes it easier for others inside to calculate their own exits. The convergence creates a feedback loop of accountability that is structurally different from anything Trump has faced before. Let us break this down into the three core reasons why the impeachment storm and the cabinet flip possibility represent the most consequential political development of Trump's second term and what their combination could mean for the future of this presidency. First, that December 2025 vote in which 140 House members advanced impeachment articles brought by Representative Al Green is far more significant than most coverage has acknowledged. On December 11, 2025, those 140 lawmakers stood up and said yes to moving forward with accusations of abuse of power tied directly to language Trump used, language critics described as calling for the execution of members of Congress themselves. This was not some abstract policy dispute or a gray area use of executive authority. It was a specific explosive charge about words directed at the safety of elected representatives. You need 218 votes to pass articles of impeachment in the full House, so 140 is not yet enough. But 140 is also not nothing. It is a verified floor, a baseline of congressional support for removal that can and likely will grow as new crises erupt, as court findings pile up, as more insiders speak out. The members who voted that day went on record with an accusation serious enough to justify the political risk. Others who stayed silent are watching, waiting for the right moment, the right additional evidence, the right shift in public sentiment. With every subsequent development that adds to the pattern of documented misconduct, that 140 tally inches closer to the threshold that could actually change history. Second, the documented history of 25th Amendment conversations inside the Trump administration is the most dangerous political fact about this presidency's relationship with its own cabinet. Those discussions did not come from shadowy leakers or partisan operatives. They emerged from books authored by people who sat in the meetings, from testimony given under oath, from reporting by journalists who named sources willing to stake their reputations on the truth. Once those conversations are part of the official record, they never disappear. They change the internal calculus for every current cabinet member watching the situation deteriorate. The precedent is set. Senior officials have already seriously considered whether this president's conduct warranted removal under the Constitution. The question now is not whether such talks could happen again, but whether the conditions that made them necessary before are worsening under the weight of mounting legal and political pressure. Each new scandal, each fresh resignation, makes those earlier discussions feel more prophetic, more urgent. Third, the panic convergence of impeachment pressure from Congress and potential cabinet pressure from inside the administration creates a political dynamic structurally different from every previous accountability moment in Trump's political life. Past fights were always two-sided, Trump and his loyalists on one side, opponents in Congress, the courts, and the media on the other. In those battles, the defense was straightforward. Frame it as partisan warfare, rally the base, hold the line along party lines. But when the president's own appointees begin raising constitutional concerns, when resignations keep adding to the public ledger of internal dissent, when 25th Amendment talks that already happened get revisited in the heat of a new crisis, the two-sided structure shatters. The partisan framing collapses under the weight of inconvenient facts. Suddenly the questions become impossible to answer with talking points. Why are his own people leaving? Why are his own cabinet members revisiting removal options? Why are insiders adding their voices to the chorus demanding accountability? Those questions demand factual answers, and the facts are already documented in books, testimony, and public statements. The coalition that has held together through sheer party loyalty starts to fray at the edges as members confront realities that cannot be wished away. Here is exactly where the nation stands right now. 140 House members voted in December 2025 to advance impeachment articles accusing Trump of abuse of power, creating a documented starting point for congressional action that is poised to expand with every new revelation. The history of senior Trump officials discussing the 25th Amendment is etched into the public record through credible accounts that no denial can erase. High-profile resignations have created a growing archive of insider testimony describing the administration's conduct from the perspective of those who could no longer stomach it. All of this congressional and cabinet pressure is colliding head-on with fraud findings in court, contempt citations that have damaged credibility, asset seizure threats from aggressive state prosecutors, bank record investigations that peel back layers of financial opacity, and judicial rulings that keep adding to the documented case for accountability. These are not isolated events. They are independent institutional forces converging like storm fronts merging into a single devastating system. The impeachment storm is not fiction or exaggeration. It is the real constitutional machinery of a republic under stress, responding to conduct that multiple branches of government have independently concluded requires serious reckoning. And the storm is not over, it is intensifying by the day. Consider how much more dangerous the 25th Amendment path is for Trump than even a third impeachment would be, even though impeachment feels more familiar. The political psychology of impeachment has been battle-tested through 2 prior cycles. Trump's team knows the script by heart, label it a witch hunt, claim Democrats have been plotting removal since day one, insist the process is being weaponized by sore losers who refuse to accept election results. Enough of the Republican base accepts that framing to keep senators in line and block conviction. The institutional memory of survival has made impeachment feel almost manageable, a known quantity they have defeated before. But the 25th Amendment follows no such script. It does not begin with opposition leaders like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer. It begins with the Vice President, with the Secretary of State, with the Secretary of Defense, with the Attorney General, the exact people Trump chose, trusted, and elevated. You cannot credibly call it a partisan assault when the declaration comes from your own hand-picked team. You cannot blame the deep state when the deep state in this scenario is composed of your own loyalists. The framing that has shielded Trump from impeachment simply does not apply here. That is why the documented record of those internal conversations carries such explosive weight. It proves the people who would have to initiate the process have already entertained the idea. The door was cracked open once. Under sufficient pressure, it could be kicked wide. The political psychology shifts from external siege to internal collapse, and that kind of collapse is far harder to survive. Now think about what this dual-track pressure impeachment build-in in Congress and 25th Amendment whispers in the cabinet means for Republican members of Congress as they look ahead to the 2026 midterms. These lawmakers are not operating in a vacuum. They are monitoring the impeachment vote count climbing from its 140 baseline. They are absorbing the same reporting about cabinet discussions that the rest of the country is reading. They are performing cold, ruthless political math about their own futures if they end up on the wrong side of history when this chapter closes. Loyalty to Trump carries a steep cost if the situation keeps unraveling and future generations view it as collaboration with documented misconduct. Breaking with him carries the immediate cost of primary challenges and base fury. Yet there is a narrowing window to position oneself as the principled Republican who chose the Constitution before it became the easy or popular choice. That window will not stay open forever. Every lawmaker watching the accountability arc unfold understands they are living through a story that will have a definitive ending, and they are quietly calculating which side of that ending they want their names attached to for the rest of their careers. What makes the situation even more volatile is that impeachment and the 25th Amendment are not mutually exclusive alternatives. They can unfold simultaneously or in rapid sequence, each amplifying the other in a compounding spiral of constitutional pressure. Imagine cabinet members beginning to signal publicly that they harbor serious concerns about the president's ability to lead. Those signals ignite fresh urgency in Congress, driving more lawmakers to support impeachment votes. The rising impeachment tally generates broader public scrutiny and media focus, which in turn puts intense pressure on remaining cabinet officials worried about their own legacies and reputations. Each track feeds the other like twin engines of a machine designed for one purpose: accountability. Impeachment momentum provides political cover for cabinet members to distance themselves without looking like lone traitors. Cabinet distancing lends credibility to impeachment advocates and encourages further Republican defections. The two mechanisms are not separate stories. They are interlocking parts of the same converging constitutional crisis that the founders deliberately built into the system to handle exactly this kind of threat to the Republic's order. The scenario we are witnessing is not inevitable. It is not a foregone conclusion or a scripted prediction. It is a clear-eyed explanation of the real constitutional tools that are currently in play and the documented pressures that continue to mount with every passing week. Whether those pressures ultimately reach the thresholds required for actual removal depends on decisions still to be made by members of Congress who have not yet committed, by cabinet officials still calculating their own moral and political positions, by a vice president weighing loyalty against duty. The story is still being written in real time, but the ingredients for a genuine constitutional endgame are undeniably present. The 140-vote impeachment baseline is documented. The 25th Amendment conversations inside the administration are documented. The resignations and protests are documented. The legal and financial pressures from courts and attorneys general are documented. Every piece is in place. The only remaining question is whether the people entrusted with authority will decide the moment has arrived to use the tools the Constitution gave them. We are watching history unfold in the halls of Congress, in the cabinet rooms of the White House, and in courtrooms where rulings continue to build the case one precedent at a time. The impeachment storm and the cabinet flip narrative resonate so powerfully because they represent the logical culmination of everything that has been accumulating across months of institutional strain. Fraud findings, contempt citations, asset threats, bank investigations, congressional calls for removal. All of it has been pointing toward a moment when the documented case for accountability becomes impossible for enough people and enough institutions to ignore. The impeachment storm is that moment taking shape through legislative action. The cabinet flip is that moment potentially erupting from within the administration itself. And the 25th Amendment is the precise constitutional mechanism that can transform documented internal concern into concrete political consequence. The air in Washington feels heavier these days, charged with the kind of electricity that precedes a major shift. Whispers travel faster than official statements. Alliances that once seemed unbreakable show visible cracks. Public trust, already fragile, hangs in the balance as citizens watch leaders grapple with questions that go to the heart of democratic stability. Will the system designed by the founders hold? Will those inside the administration who once pledged loyalty choose country over career when the pressure peaks? Will Congress find the courage to act on the growing evidence before it? These are not abstract debates for law school seminars. They are live, breathing questions playing out in the most powerful corridors on earth, affecting every American and every ally abroad who looks to the United States for leadership. The pressure is real, the stakes are historic, and the constitutional tools stand ready for those with the authority to wield them. Every new revelation, every additional resignation, every incremental vote adds another layer to the gathering storm. The walls that once protected the presidency are now shifting inward from all sides, and the question is no longer whether change is coming, but how sweeping that change will ultimately be. The Republic's safeguards are being tested in ways few alive today have ever witnessed, and the outcome will echo far beyond any single administration. It will define how future generations remember this era of American politics, whether as a moment when institutions bent but did not break, or as the point when internal fractures finally forced a reckoning long in the making. The storm continues to build, and the nation holds its collective breath, waiting to see which way the wind